Welcome to the Cowboy Office Show, where you'll experience expert analysis and epic discussion on key pillars of the equine industry, including sports, business, hobby, and the horse lifestyle. Your co-hosts are Jody Brainerd and Brian Dykert, industry veterans with over 120 years combined living the cowboy lifestyle. The Cowboy Office Show will help you get involved, ask more questions, and create change. We'll keep riding for you as together we learn from the ride already ridden, learn to listen better to our horse, and make our industry better for all. Each weekly episode will take a ride around the industry in less time than you can load the truck and trailer. Drop your email at cowboyoffice.com to receive weekly updates and never miss an episode. Saddle up as we ride into today's show.
Well, Happy New Year, Horse World. It's 2023 already. We're all another year older and hopefully a year wiser. Welcome to the Cowboy Office. I'm Brian.
And I'm Jody. I'd like to welcome you to this great episode in our series, Status of the Horse Show Industry. You know, we've got a great guest today to talk horse industry, and we're starting right at the top. We cannot go any higher. Our guest today is Julie Broadway. She is the president of the American Horse Council. She is a horsewoman herself, and she's got extensive background with the Morgan horse industry. Julie, welcome.
Thanks. Happy New Year, Jody and Brian. I'm delighted to be with you. I was just saying before we began the recording that, wow, where did 2022 go? I can hardly believe it's January.
Isn't that the truth? Yep. How fast time marches. And as we get older, it seems to go a little faster.
It does.
It goes faster. Yes, it does.
Yeah. Well, tell us for a minute. We will, for the audience, have all of the Horse Council's direct contacts. Not only can they go to your website, which is very extensive at horsecouncil.org, but we will also put direct links through the Cowboy Office website. So they'll be able to get to you guys, communicate, look, listen. But tell us, you got some new offices, and it's a new year. So tell us what that's all about. And it's always a chore to move, but... So fill us in.
Yep, just a little background for those that aren't familiar with the American Horse Council. We were formed in 1969 to be the voice of the equine industry in Washington, D.C. We've had a number of offices downtown in D.C., but most recently our office, which was located very near the White House, I could see Lafayette Park from my window, the building was sold. And so we had to make a choice. And so we just moved December the 15th, right at the end of the year, and packed everything up. And boy, you can accumulate some stuff in all those years, guys. And it took a little while to get it all organized, but we're excited about being in our new office, which is what you see behind me, and sort of getting ourselves going for the new year.
Well, that's exciting. Yes, there's a good and a bad with moving, right? It helps you kind of get reorganized and clean out some of the old and get ready for the new, but it's always a chore.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of things that I'm going to be looking for in this office, and it's going to be a little more challenging to put my fingertips on them.
Yep, understand. So tell us more specifically about the American Horse Council, what it is and what it does, and why do all of us as horse people need to be paying attention?
Well, the mission of the American Horse Council is to protect and strengthen the U.S. equine industry. We're the voice of the industry in Washington, D.C. We are bipartisan, and we work on both legislative and regulatory issues. I'll talk some more about that in a little while, why that's important. But we represent all aspects of the industry. It doesn't matter if you're a horse owner or you're part of a syndicate or you're just a trail rider or you are a bull rider or whatever you do in our space. You're part of who we represent. That means we have somewhere in the neighborhood of 150 or 200 large organizations ranging from AQHA to PRCA to American Paint Horse, to name just a few, down to equine veterinarians, equine accountants, equine attorneys, small businesses of all sizes and natures that are part of our industry, down to individual owners. We have a lot of owners across the country, probably we think about 2 million. And we really rely on them to tell us what are the things that they are facing, what are the issues that they are dealing with, and to give us feedback on the things that we're working on for them in D.C. I often describe something that starts off in D.C. is likely to trickle down Or it could go the opposite way. An issue that comes up locally or at the state level could begin to trickle up or move up the chain and become something that we see across the states. And there's lots of examples of those. So it's really important that we keep our ear to the ground. We really know what's going on state, local, and federal level. I don't have enough resources to go to state capitals or at the local level. So we really concentrate on federal issues, but we really work hard with our partners, which is the Coalition of State Horse Councils. Not every state has a state horse council. There are 26 official state horse councils that we recognize across the country. So we've got some room for improvement. But what that means is that we rely on those state horse councils to help us do the lobbying and the grassroots advocacy work that has to be done at the state and local level. They, in turn, are our resources to help us when we need to work on federal issues too.
Well, let me elaborate just a touch, because if 26 states have organized affiliates for the Horse Council, why aren't the rest of them?
So that's a great question. Some of it has to do with resources, meaning revenues, the means to support a state horse council. In some states, and I'm going to give you 3 examples, the 3 states that are the largest in horse population are California, Texas, and Florida. Those 3 states do not have a state horse council. And that's really
interesting.
Isn't that interesting? But I believe personally that the reason for that is because it's such a diverse population of equestrians and equine enthusiasts in those states that it's hard for them to get themselves organized and to really work cohesively as a state horse council. So it's a little more sporadic in some of those states for those reasons. Some states have a great revenue stream. Maryland's a good example. They have a lot of different ways that they get funding from the state. They sell equestrian license plates, they certify stables and barns, and they get a piece of that money. There's a number of different avenues, but some states don't have that. They really rely on membership dues or maybe a horse expo in their state as a source of revenue. So in some states, they have volunteers that handle the state horse council, makes it a little more challenging, whereas in other states, they have paid staff and they can do so much more.
That's interesting. So when you talk about revenue streams for state horse councils that would be coming through state tax processes, because I'm interpreting, because what you said was on, which is business licenses, right? So if states would put that in where horse businesses would need to be buying an annual license, and a portion of that could be a revenue stream. So that's food for thought, right?
Right. We also see other states that sell different kinds of signage, whether that's an equine liability sign to the facilities or crossing signs for trails or those kinds of things. So lots of different ways that each state has come up with an avenue to have some revenues.
Right. That's very interesting. Go ahead, John.
Right. Okay, well, Julie, this is a great conversation, and the 3 of us have grown up in the horse business. And, I was just thinking about this as you were talking about numbers and talking about Florida and California and diverse groups of people. And the cowboy lifestyle as one, the Western lifestyle, rather you're in the livestock business, that's a group of fiercely independent people, right? I mean, it's kind of like, it's like, you're not going to tell me what to do, right? You're not going to do that. And you guys do so much, and I think that along with, horses are kind of like cars. You might want to drive a Ford pickup truck, and somebody else wants to drive a Corvette, and they don't want to take care of each other. I mean, how difficult is it for you to try and unite these groups? I mean, I assume that's got to be one of the biggest issues that you're dealing with.
It is, and I repeat over and over to audiences that we operate by consensus. And what that means is that when the industry can coalesce around a decision or a solution or a strategy, the American Horse Council takes a position. But if we are split as an industry, we don't want to cause any more divisiveness amongst the industry. So we remain neutral. We speak to all aspects of the issue, but we don't weigh in. And sometimes that's frustrating for people. They'll say, why can you not take a position on this particular issue? And I give examples. I say, like for the Horse Racing Integrity and Safety Act that went through, we had some thoroughbred folks that were proponents of that. We had some standardbred folks that were opponents of that, as was the American Quarter Horse Association. So it would be inappropriate for the American Horse Council to pick a side and alienate one group or another. So what we do is we try to be an honest information broker. That's my phrase when I go into a congressional office. I'm here to tell you all aspects of this issue, and where I'm neutral because we're split as an industry, I'm going to tell you exactly why we're split, and I'm going to put you in touch with the right people to hear their version of the story so you can make up your own mind about what you think is the right thing to do as a congressional member.
Well, on that subject, tell us the difference between legislative functions and authority and the things that you're involved in, because as legislature moves through there, versus regulatory.
Okay.
And why does a horse owner need to be paying attention to that?
So, as you probably know, legislative side is when there are pieces of a bill that are being considered to be implemented, and some of them may take effect and may have unintended consequences. So we spend a lot of time in congressional offices doing education, trying to make sure congressional members are well informed and understand all aspects of a particular piece of legislation that they're going to be making a decision about. Then on the regulatory side, once something becomes approved, then the agencies are assigned to take care of that. So U.S. Department of Agriculture, Environmental Protection Agency, Bureau of Land Management. So the regulatory side is working with those agencies now that we have rules and regulations to make certain that those are being handled appropriately. And then if they need a little tweaking, if there's a little something that needs to be addressed, like the Horse Protection Act, we'd like to see some improvements in that, then we work with those agencies on the regulatory side. I mentioned just recently to a colleague, you probably don't realize how much regulatory work we do. We spend a lot of time with the Environmental Protection Agency. We're talking about pyrethrins, which is fly spray. We're talking about rodenticides, which is rat control. And there's just a number of issues. You wouldn't believe how many times I have to call the Federal Aviation Administration because I have a farm owner who's upset about a drone that's flying over his pasture and it's frightening his horse. So the diversity of the issues is just phenomenal.
Right. And so the horse world is routinely communicating with you, no matter whether it's an individual issue and or state and or federal, right?
Yep, exactly. Horse owners call our office frequently and they ask us questions like, okay, so my child has some learning disabilities. Where do I find a well-qualified therapeutic riding facility? Or they'll call and they'll say, I've got to do my taxes. I don't understand the hobby loss rules. Where do I learn more about that? Or the next question might be, I bought a horse and I need to get the papers and I need to get it registered, but I don't know how to do that. Can you point me in the right direction? So Brian, it runs from the average horse owner who's got a horse in his backyard that he's just enjoying on the trail, who's got questions about some of this, all the way up to the jockey club, which is on the thoroughbred industry, which is a large organization who's dealing with a lot of major issues over there.
Right. Yeah, race horses as an industry. It's not just the thoroughbreds, but you got standardbreds, quarter horse. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. Okay. Yep.
Well, I'm glad that I don't have to answer your telephone every day, Julie. That's why. Okay.
I tell people all the time, Jody, I never know what my day is going to be like some days. I come in with a plan for things that I want to work on, but when the phone rings, you never know where it's going to take you.
Well,
it's never dull.
No.
Well, let me ask you one more question before we move on the topic, and that is, should individuals be members of the American Horse Council, or is it only for organizations?
No, it's very important that individuals are members, because when we have a call to action, when there's a piece of legislation that we're trying to influence, we turn to our members to write letters, and we help them, we provide them with tools and resources to contact their congressional members, because those congressional members want to hear from the constituents. I mean, they're happy to hear what I have to say, but it means more when Jody calls and says, hey, you need to know I'm voting for you or against you, and here's what I need you to help me with. So we really want individuals to be members of the organization. I also think it's important for individuals to be members because they need to stay abreast of what might be coming towards them. A couple of years ago, we went through a whole challenge with electronic logging devices. and commercial driver's licenses. And we still work on that issue today. But the real issue there was Jody doesn't even know that they were considering what size truck and trailer, what weight, gross weight might play in to having to have an electronic logging device. And Jody just wants to take his grandchildren and go down to the corner show with two horses. He doesn't want to have to install an electronic logging device or keep a log book or do all those other things. But that's an education thing with the Department of Transportation that we spend a tremendous amount of time and energy. And in fact, if you didn't know this, they got so many phone calls from horse people, they had to set up a dedicated phone line just wow. for the equestrian community, because we were in such an uproar over that issue.
Well, isn't that good? And then two, that kind of response would then get to the right reaction. But so it's relatively easy for any individual to be a member. And one of the big things would be information, but you guys publish a monthly newsletter. Yeah. So if you were, right?
Mm-hmm. So put out a month. Yeah, we put out a monthly newsletter. The other thing is we do offer a tremendous number of discounts. You would be surprised how many people join the American Horse Council because they get a discount on a John Deere tractor, or they get a discount on Red Brand fencing, or whatever the product is that they might be interested in. But it really creates that sense of community, that you're in the know and that you've got like-minded people who are also dealing with some of the same issues that you're probably dealing with. And it's a great avenue just to stay abreast of what's going on.
Good. So I'm going to one more question on that topic before we move on, which is about, because you guys talk about you're communicating with about 1 million horse people on a routine basis. But according to the president's letter not too long ago, and based on research, there's about 30% of the U.S. households that have horse interest. And so my question is, how does the Horse Council and how do we as horse people help activate and get in touch with that 30% of the U.S. households? And do you guys, go ahead.
Nope, there's two ways. So we want you to be a member of the American Horse Council. That gets you the greatest amount of information flow both directions. But if you're a little reluctant to do that, we want you to join for free our Congressional Horse Cavalry. All you have to do is go to our website, sign up. That puts you in the database that we only use when we need a call to action. So if we have a piece of legislation that we need you to reach out to your congressional member on, you're going to hear from us then. You're not going to get anything else from us because some people don't want us to flood their inbox, and we're okay with that. But the point is, you're exactly right. About 30.5% of U.S. households contain a horse enthusiast. We think there are 2 million horse owners in the United States, and I reach 1 million. So my goal every day is to try to figure out how to reach that other million that are out there. And we really rely on our partners, whether that be other breed and discipline associations or state horse councils, or even our stakeholders like Zoetis or Purina or others, Equine Network or American Horse Publications. The list just goes on and on. We really leverage all of those.
Good. Perfect. That's really, really good. When, so Brian, we've talked about with Julie prior to this about the current status of the industry. So, can you expound a little bit on that 2017 study that you were talking about, Brian, like the question that you were going to ask?
Sure. It's time to talk about the economic impact. And so, Julie, we'd really like you to, highlight, because the last study, you guys study every 5 years to my info. So the last study was 2017. You've got one engaged to get going in 2023. And I believe there's a fundraising effort to help for funding source. This is a big question, but it's all relative. And the bigger question is, as you waltz through the 2017 data relative to the current status of the industry, if we looked over 10 years from 2012 to 2022, what are we looking like? And then do you have any expectation as to what 2023 is going to produce as you guys go study? I know that was a big question.
Nope, that's a lot to take in there. So just for your listeners, yes, we do the study about every 5 years. 2017, I joined the American Horse Council in 2016. 2017, we did this study. I think you're your viewers can see the numbers here. We were really pleased. 122 billion with a B in total value added to the U.S. economy. That was up from the previous study. We had a total employment impact of 1.7 million jobs. That's nothing to sneeze at, folks. That gets us lots of attention up on the Hill. We had a population of 7.2 million horses in 2017. That was down 2 million horses from the last study. So it goes up and down. Population goes up and down. But we were really pleased. We did a new statistic that you mentioned earlier that we've never done before, which said 30.5% of U.S. households, or 38 million households, contain a horse enthusiast. So that's a great number. We use it a lot when we meet with congressional members. We're really, really pleased with all of these statistics that came out of 2017. Now, we're getting ready for 2023. Going into the pandemic, we were a little nervous. We were concerned that things were going to get a little soft and we might see the industry contract a little bit. In fact, all anecdotes that we've heard is the opposite happened. Believe it or not, memberships went up in breed associations, registrations went up. We saw attendance at events become, once people could get back out, booming like crazy. Lots and lots of attendees, lots of enthusiasm, large entries at shows and competitions. So we're hoping that for 2023, we're going to see things really strong and healthy. We may see the horse population drop a little bit more because people may have slowed down with their breeding during the pandemic. On the other hand, I have lots of friends who breed who said, hey, I was home. I had time to study my pedigrees and figure this thing out. And I did some breeding while I was home. What else could I do, kind of thing. So we're really anxious about 2023. We're going to ask some new questions in 2023 that we haven't asked before. So we're looking forward to seeing what results we get out of that. It's so important that this data be collected, and it has to be fresh data. You can only use 2017 numbers for so long before everybody sort of goes, and so we really are looking forward to 2023. Now, I mentioned to you and Jody earlier, so I want to tell your listeners, there's 3 studies that are done. Our study, which is the most comprehensive of any study. There is a National Agricultural Statistics Service, or NASS study, which is done by the USDA. They do their study, but they only count horses that meet certain criteria. So the difference between my number of 7.2 million horses in 2017, their number was about 2.5 million. So their number is really geared towards horses that are on working farms, production. So it's a very different kind of number. And then the American Veterinary Medical Association does a study called Pet Source, which really focuses on dogs and cats, called Pet Source, of course. But they do ask people who complete the survey to tell them how many horses they have. So they have yet a different population number. So we try to tell folks those data points are good for those purposes, but if you want the most comprehensive number, that comes from us. And in fact, our numbers are the one that a number of other people rely on, including the outdoor recreation industry and a couple of others who want to know, what the total impact is.
Great. Yeah, I've seen it referenced. I mean, over my career, the American Horse Council has been referenced numerous times. It's a reflex, so I hear that one all the time in the industry. But I was where the other ones too, and people do get confused because they don't understand that nuance and or where it's coming from. So yeah.
Yeah, and it's an important factor. We are really campaigning. I'm going to do my little spiel now. We're really campaigning with USDA to fund a horse industry census in the next couple of years. We're hoping we can get that done. It would be a complete census, inclusive of everything, because so much of the funding that we get from the government is based upon the USDA's number, that 2.5 million that I mentioned, not the 7.2 million. So we need them to have a better number so that we get better funding to help us with disease mitigation and other things that we need to do for the industry. It's all about herd health.
Understood, and that's a great term, especially in today's time, because the American population is just another form of a herd. But USDA and census, because your study is a formal scientific study, but it's not the same as the population census, because that's what you would be talking about. Is that correct? That if
That's
you got
correct.
the US, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
because we collect data from everyone who will participate in the survey, but we have to take that data and we have to run it through a model, and we have to do some forecasting and some projections to get us to some of the numbers that we use. What we don't count every horse. That's why it's called an economic impact study. If they went and did an equine census, they would count every single horse. So we really love them to do that.
And are you getting positive momentum on that?
Yep, we're getting positive momentum on that, and I'm really happy. One of the leaders on the Ag Committee is a huge supporter of the American Horse Council and has been really instrumental in helping us kind of beat that drum.
Well, good. That'll be exciting to see.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. I thought that was interesting when we talked about the COVID times. I did like a little personal survey a couple of years ago when the first thing hit, and everybody was really worried about it. And I called 20 of my friends horse trainers, and because that part of my life is basically over. But I wanted to know the impact that it was just going to have from a horse trainer standpoint, because that's what I did for a living my whole life. And I think I talked to one trainer that lost one horse. The rest of them maintained. So, I thought that was incredibly interesting that, during everybody didn't know whether they were supposed to panic or not. Everybody kept their horses in training because, you know what, we're still going to go show. That's what we want to do. So,
I'll give you one more factoid to go with this. So, during the pandemic, a lot of people moved out of the city and into rural areas. Got themselves some more space and some more elbow room. That gave them the opportunity. They worked from home. They had more free time. That gave them the opportunity to adopt more horses. We saw horse adoptions go up during the pandemic. And I jokingly said, I think what happened was somebody said, I've always wanted to have a horse. Let me go over here to this rescue and talk to them, and maybe I can adopt something. And the rescue said, horses don't like to live alone. Take two.
Exactly.
So it was really interesting to see that trend, because when we went through the recession many years ago, what we saw was people abandoning horses and relinquishing them to rescues and sanctuaries. We were very, very lucky, knock wood, guys. During the pandemic, we didn't have that happen this time. So I was really pleased with that.
Isn't that that's great news? That's great news. Yeah.
It was really interesting, for sure. So, and to feed along with this, and this is a Brian question right here too. Do you feel like the horse industry is growing? The horse industry itself growing, not just numbers, but the industry itself, is it growing? Do you think we're shrinking, maintaining? What's your gut feeling?
So
not that your numbers tell you.
Okay, so I'm going to tell you, my gut says that we're doing well. We're healthy. I would love to see us grow some more. If you take that 38 million households that contain a horse enthusiast, and there are 2 million horse owners, we got a lot of potential. So there's lots of opportunities. The real challenge we have as an industry is to find ways to reach those audiences that make them feel welcome and make them feel that they can be engaged in this. We're rolling out a new marketing initiative this year called Here for Horses. And it's all about how we're here for horses and horses are here for us. And you can be involved in any way you want to. You can be a spectator. You can be an owner. You can be a volunteer. You can get engaged at any level that you like. It's amazing to me how many people go to a rescue or a therapeutic riding center, want to volunteer, they fall in love with what we do. Next thing you know, they've bought their first horse or two, and it sort of goes from there. So our biggest challenge is to make this feel like an open pathway that people can find somewhere to get involved in the industry and not feel that it's just overwhelming them. We're our own worst enemies sometimes. Child comes to take riding lessons, and the first thing the trainer says, well, you're going to have to buy this and you're going to have to buy that, and this is how much the lessons are, and blah, 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 blah. And the next thing you know, the parent's like, hey, we can go play soccer. It's so much less invasive.
Right. That's it. That is absolutely true. And I think that's awesome that people have the option because, to be perfectly honest, this is not a cheap hobby any way, shape, or form. It doesn't matter what discipline you're in. And it gives people some options to get started where maybe they don't think that it's going to break their personal bank account to get their kids involved. So, no, that's awesome.
Well, I'm not going to say that I'm a proponent or an opponent of sports betting, but by the way, sports betting has brought us some new enthusiasts. People go, they are, they're going to play the slots, they're going to do whatever they're going to do, and oh, by the way, there's a horse race going on. Now I can bet on that. So, exposure, that's what it's all about.
And I agree, but I want to ask you one on the betting, because we've casually talked about that. And let me just, the simple question is, moving horse betting, because it's been around in parimutuel and racing for our lifetime, but as you move into the competitive side of the space, are there things there that we as an industry need to be paying attention to? Are there concerns? Is that a target for horse betting now that it's digital? I've merely raised that from a concept standpoint, because we as an industry, I think, especially in the organized side of competition always breeds that, whether it's formal or informal gambling, who's going to win, who's better. It's just in our nature. So any insights from your standpoint there?
Yeah, I think we're going to really have to be mindful and think about the lessons we've learned as sports betting has rolled out, especially like on the racing side. But right now, there's a lot of conversation around fantasy gaming, about taking some of the things that we're doing, whether it's the hunter jumper shows or it's a dressage show or whatever it is, and making it such that there's more opportunities for some fantasy gaming or some sports betting type opportunities. And I think we're going to have to be really careful about that and be mindful of sort of some of the pitfalls or some of the downside that we might get into, and sort of be more proactive in ensuring that we don't hurt ourselves in the long run by trying to make more money by doing some of those kinds of things.
Right. We saw that, and Jody and I have been talking about it just from a concept standpoint, since it all's kind of coming our way in modernization. So I was curious as you brought that up.
It's amazing to me when I watch TV now and I see DraftKings and I see all those other things that are out there. You can bet on just about anything these days.
Isn't that the truth? Yep.
Yeah, it is. I mean, and it's, like I said, it's coming. I mean, it will come. And I think with with so many casinos in the state of Oklahoma, not just the racehorses, but so many events that we have, I mean, it's a matter of time before Vegas or before a state like Oklahoma with as many casinos that horse betting on a big roping, you know what I mean? They're paying hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars, those guys, the team ropings are now. It's just a matter of time before it happens, I think. But how it's controlled, that's a whole nother story.
Well, I talk a lot about the importance of understanding what the social license to operate is. So a social license to operate basically says that there are different levels of society that regulate the activities that we do using laws. And there's this second layer of permission that's granted or revoked by the public. That second layer is called social license to operate. And a great example there is, if you aren't mindful of what you're doing, public perception can affect your social license to operate. Think about the circus. Think about SeaWorld. Think about greyhound racing. So your point is well taken, Jody, that we have to be really smart if we're going to go down that path, because what we could end up unintentionally doing is hurting ourselves in the long run and affecting our social license to operate.
Isn't that that's a big point. And the circus, I've talked about that one several times in most recent years, because that's a fascinating case study. The circus, and the fact that they actually got it shut down, which is what you're talking about.
Yeah. The other topic that I talk a lot about that we need to be mindful of is people begin to believe now that horses should be considered or classified as companion animals or pets instead of livestock. And I try very hard to warn people, we don't want to go down that path. Horses are under the protection, now back to my herd health issue, of the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and we get government funding to help with that. If horses were not considered livestock, we wouldn't have that kind of funding or that kind of assistance from the U.S. Department of Agriculture. There are tax benefits we get, farm tax exemptions or depreciation. The liability laws apply to livestock, not to companion animals. So people think that maybe horses being classified as companion animals or pets would be better, but we need to be really, really cautious about that, because there are lots of things that are on here that that I think could disappear and really jeopardize the number of people who might continue to be engaged in the horse industry. And I'm sorry if people feel like this is about the dollars and cents, but if Jody says, well, gee, I got these horses and I no longer get any farm tax exemptions, or I no longer get any depreciation, and I can't own as many horses, maybe he changes his entire strategy about how he participates in the entire industry. So we need to be really conscious about these issues.
Right. I think that that's a really valid point. And the point is, it's not about what your business is or isn't. It's about that classification on the legal level is in everybody's best interest. That I highly valid point. And I hear that a lot too.
That from someone who's made a living and grown up in the horse business, second generation guy, that two things that, first of all, it would make me angry, and then it scare the heck out of me. I mean, it's like horse is a horse. It's not a companion animal. I mean, it's he's not how would I ever get him into Walmart, for crying out loud, right? My companion. Seriously, it's frightening.
I think you bring up a really valid point that I think all of us in the horse industry take for granted a lot in that point, because what makes the horse, even though it's part of the livestock and part of agriculture and all that stuff, it has this very unique place with us because it hits us in a more emotional state than a lot of other livestock. And it's not that we don't love our animals, but that bond and relationship that horsemen and women do with their horses, that puts it in this very unique space. So anyways, that's just kind of my take on it. And then when you try to waltz through the organization, you'll find yourself in some of these categories. But whether you're in the horse business or not, it is in everybody's best interest that horses stay categorized with the U.S. economy as livestock. That's the point, right, Julie?
Yeah, and again, I can't emphasize enough, the U.S. Department of Agriculture is there to protect the health of the herd. And they ensure when we import and we export horses that we don't inadvertently bring in a catastrophic disease that could decimate the entire population. And I'm trying not to be Chicken Little here, but if that all went away, who would look out for the well-being of these horses and ensure that we don't have these diseases or these other circumstances that might affect the overall herd health?
Yep.
Absolutely.
Extremely valid point.
Yep.
Tell us real quick before we move on in topic, because you got such a large herd that you're trying to keep gathered up. I'm talking about the people that are involved in the horse world. And you made reference to consensus, and when there's a lack of consensus, you guys as an organization stay neutral. But who's the driving force behind making those decisions? Where does that consensus come from? Is that a formal or informal kind of consensus? How are you guys doing that?
Oh, that's a really complicated question. I'll give you a short version. So what tends to happen is when an issue or a topic comes up that we think may have either a positive or a negative impact on the industry, it's a responsibility of the staff of the American Horse Council to do our due diligence, do our research, make sure we understand the issue thoroughly. Then that issue goes to the appropriate committee that we have. So we'll take an issue and we'll go to committee and we'll say, okay, here's all of our research. We might form a task force to do even more research. We might ask more opinions. We might survey people, everything we can to get as much information as we can. Then we ask the committee to determine if they have an opinion or a position that they want to recommend to our trustees. So the committee has to come together, and then the committee makes a recommendation to the trustees, and then the trustees get another opportunity to ask more questions, look at all that before the trustees makes a decision about where we want to go on something. I can give you numerous examples of issues that have popped up over time. A great one most recently you probably saw in the Washington Post was unsanctioned horse racing. So that has a lot of tentacles and a lot of different elements to it. The element we're most concerned about, again, is disease mitigation. And we often see at unsanctioned pop-up races that they're sharing needles, that they're in using things that they probably aren't in the best interest of the horse. And so what we're trying to do is determine what's the right strategy on unsanctioned horse racing. So that went through a task force. We did a tremendous amount of research. Then it went not only to our racing committee, it also went to our health and regulatory committee and our welfare committee. So 3 committees got to weigh in on that one to determine what might be the next steps that we want to take on that. So that's how it works, Brian.
Got it. So people, either through their own organizations and or them as individuals, could get informed on the American Horse Council, and I know it's all on your website, so they can find those committees and then communicate kind of that way on issues. Would that be sensible?
Mm-hmm. And they're happy to call the staff too. I mean, it's not unusual for somebody to call and say to us, hey, I've got a question about a particular topic or a subject, and we'll go do a little due diligence on it, come back to them, and then we'll decide if we think it's something significant enough that we want to go to committee. Pyrethrin is a big one for me right now. We all use fly spray. Everybody's got one of those squeeze bottles out there. And pyrethrin is that chemical that's in that fly spray. We've used it for, 50 plus years. But for them to decide now that they don't have enough data to tell us whether or not pyrethrin has some kind of negative effect on people that are bystanders, it's not about the horses, it's about the people, and decide that they're going to tell us that we can no longer use pyrethrin. We said, wait, we have fly spray manufacturers. They've got all kinds of data that can answer that question. Don't go there quite yet. And so we've put that off, and we've provided them with some information about that. But that's a great example of an issue that seems really small on the surface, but has huge implications.
Thank you.
Yep.
We'll go ahead and move on. And we've been hitting it, so which is the American Horse Council programs, and you have a long list because I know you guys are very active in a number of the areas across the industry and issues. But we've got up on the screen a piece from your most recent newsletter, which was the December one, because all it does is kind of give a highlight to the all the programs that you guys have, and you made reference to your Here for Horses. That got my attention, as well as your marketing alliance. But there were also some key things in the December newsletter that got my attention: IRS, taxes, Venmo, PayPal, the $600 threshold versus 20,000, the difference between business commerce and just a consumer. And so we're not going to have the time to go into all those details, but I use those as simple pieces, kind of highlight some of your programs, the Here for Horses you just made reference to, but so that the audience can truly begin to, one, understand, but then two, know to go to the American Horse Council .org website, because you guys are very active and very organized. So go ahead.
So let me just preface this by saying, because we are that neutral third party, we're like Switzerland, if you will, we are often asked by the industry to spearhead or oversee an industry initiative, something that'll benefit the entire industry, because we're that umbrella organization. So great examples: the Equine Disease Communication Center, because we've been talking about disease. We worked on that with the American Association of Equine Practitioners. We sponsor the horse microchip lookup tool. So that's a great place to go if we have an animal control officer. He comes upon a horse and he scans him and he has a chip number. He can back up and he can find out all kinds of information about that horse and where he was registered and who he belonged to and all kinds of interesting information. The United Horse Coalition is the initiative that we have that helps horse owners who are at risk or have concerns about being able to maintain their horses. So it's a huge database. If you need a hay bank or a feed coupon, or you are looking for a gelding clinic, or you need vet assistance, go out there, go into the database, put in your zip code. It's going to tell you what's in your area that can help you out, because our goal is for owners to be able to keep their horses at home. We don't want them to have to relinquish them to rescues and sanctuaries. But on the other end of the spectrum, we have a research project right now called the Equine Welfare Data Collective. So we've known kind of vaguely for many years how many horses we thought were in rescues and sanctuaries, but we didn't know exactly. So this is a research project that AAEP, ASPCA, and AHC went in together because we really wanted to get a handle on how many horses were in rescues and sanctuaries. You probably didn't know this, but there are about 1,000 501c3 rescues and sanctuaries across the country. We think the capacity that they have is about 47,000 horses. They could probably take a few more if they had more resources, but that's not always available to them. But we also wanted to learn what are the most common ways a horse gets into a rescue or sanctuary. How long is its average length of stay? Dogs and cats go to a rescue and they can quickly be rehabilitated and be adopted maybe in 30 to 60 days. A horse is in a rescue or a sanctuary almost a full year, over 300 days. And that's because sometimes they have gotten in really poor health and it takes a long time to rehabilitate them, but they have to be retrained for a new career, lots of things like that. So we wanted to understand that because the whole idea behind this initiative is to be able to offer additional resources that will help address these little pinch points that we've got out there. And then I'll just close by telling you two of the big projects that I'm really proud of that we did during the pandemic was we formed a diversity, equality, and inclusion task force. This is designed to help ensure that our industry is being open and embracing diversity and inclusion and equality. And we've got a great group of folks working on that. And then we have a youth engagement task force, which is really working hard right now to how do we get kids to stay in the horse industry. Now, you tell me, Brian, but a lot of kids get involved with horses. They stay maybe through high school. They go off to college. They kind of fade away. They start their careers. They start their families. They don't come back until they're in their 30s. So somewhere between, that 18 to like 30 range, we have this big gap. And we're trying to say, okay, how do we solve that challenge that we've got right there? How do we make this easier for kids to get in and to stay in?
That's an interesting question because and I'm sorry for pausing and getting stuck, but because the point is that significantly different over multiple generations? I'm not sure. That's a bigger question. One of the things that I would be thinking about in the youth conversation is a fascinating one in the last 10 to 20 years. Unlike when Jody and I, and even you probably grew up and how we got introduced to horses, and we can all tell our stories, but that's a cultural change because of the U.S. population, and agriculture is now a minority, not in significance, but in volume. I mean, everybody was touched by the farm in our lifetime. In today's time, you're quite removed from the farm. So that's a cultural kind of shift. And so your question is fascinating. This is me. I think that there are unique opportunities using technology. One, getting younger people fundamentally exposed to the fundamentals of what horses are and do. And then two, how do you get them directly involved? And the high school and junior colleges and even the university programs, because I see university programs growing with their equestrian programs. And I would see that as a key component, not only to feeding careers into our industry, but that they're getting mentoring and advice and some leadership and exposure that otherwise they may not. So it's a phenomenal question. I don't have the answer, but Jody, do you got an insight on that? And Jody's got a niece that is head coach at OSU. So.
Yeah, well, she, and I tell you, I was just going to mention that. It's great growing up in the horse business. It was awesome, and because it was when you're a young man, it's about 5-to-1 girls to guys, right? And it has not changed. And I can't tell you because I've trained for lots and lots of parents and now second generations again. I mean, the girls come back. But it is, and it hasn't changed any. It's still 5-to-1. How are you going to bring the boys into this thing? I mean, it's like I can tell you that there's, huge numbers of parents that are stuck with trucks and trailers when the girls go to college because, you know what, okay, we're not doing this anymore. Or they get married or they get a job, and they'll come back to it, just like you said, Julie, in their 30s. But, it's one-sided. I think the girls' horse hearts are much bigger than the boys are. So I always thought that was interesting.
Well, I talked earlier about diversity, equality, and inclusion, and I'm a huge fan of Cowgirls of Color and Compton Cowboys and Detroit Horsepower and all of these other inner city programs and other programs that are bringing other ethnicities to our space, which is great. We need more people and we want to get them engaged. So it's just like the same thing with the boys. We just got to find that little trick, whatever it is. And maybe it's the 5-to-1 ratio that we need to rely on there.
Exactly. That would help.
Maybe we just need to tell the boys that here's where the girls are.
Right, exactly. It could happen. And Brian, I know your time wise, you lead this because you've got a better idea where you want to go. Julie, I just want to ask you another question once, and this is one that I like to ask everyone, and it's like, where and who do you think is leading the decision making and setting the standards in the horse business? I mean, we've got AQHA, you've got so many, the Morgan Horse Association. I mean, is it owners? Is it the trainers themselves that are running the show? Is it the bureaucrats? Is it the heads of these associations? I mean, it's a tough question, but who do you think has greatest input?
Well, I'm going to give you a soft answer, Jody, but bear with me. I think it really varies based upon the topic. If we're talking about who has the greatest influence when it comes to what competitions you're going to compete at or what events you're going to go to, I think trainers have a lot of influence there. I think if you're talking about which trails we need to maintain or, which trailheads need improvement or amenities in the Forest Service or the Park Service, that's horse owners. Those are the people out there using those things. I do think that there are some bureaucrats that are really involved. You think about, I just said, like the Park Service or the Forest Service, they have a lot of say in where we put some of these dollars for some of those improvements that we want to do there. So we have to sort of dance with our partners a little bit, as they say, on some of those issues. So I think each segment of the industry has a variety of stakeholders that have a lot of influence on a very specific number of things.
Okay, cool. Great answer. Thank you.
We're going to move on. I want you to, Julie, tell the audience about the annual forum. And one, how do they pay attention? Two, what do you do with it? And three, why they should be paying attention to it. So tell us about the American Horse Council's annual forum.
Yeah, so each year the American Horse Council hosts our annual forum or our conference. It's traditionally been done in June, and we have historically done it more in D.C. because it gives us access to congressional offices. But we're going to start alternating. So in June of 2023, we're going to be in Denver. I'm really excited about that opportunity. So we're hoping we're going to see some more of you cowboys out there, that Western Lifestyle group, join us in Denver a little bit. And then we'll alternate between East Coast and West Coast. That's sort of our hope. Now, it's set up such that our committees meet over the course of about 2 days. So there's great discussion there. If you really want to get into the nitty-gritty of the issues that we're talking about in the Equine Welfare Committee or, say, in the Racing Committee, then you can sit in on those meetings and hear all those conversations and be part of some of that conversation. We also have 1 or 1.5 days that we call our National Issues Forum, and that's where we pick speakers and subjects that are really thought-provoking. They're intended to get people thinking outside the box and get them really looking ahead and say to ourselves, okay, what's the possible implication of this? So we might have a panel discussion on sort of what's going on. We did one this past year, post-pandemic, on horse prices. Golly Pete, everybody was talking about how horse prices had just skyrocketed. So we had a whole panel discussion about what horse prices were and how that was playing out and what we saw was going to be the trend there. But we also had a great presenter that talked about how we take advantage of some of the benefits we saw from the pandemic. How do we keep riding the wave, as we call it? We're on this upward crest of the wave because we did so well during the pandemic. How do we keep that going? How do we leverage that? So we'll have a variety of speakers that come in that really are intended to be very thought-provoking and to really get people thinking and talking about some of those issues that are out there. We have usually somewhere in the neighborhood of about 200, 250 people attend. It's the CEOs and the executive directors, the leaders from all of the various breeds and disciplines. We'll see people from all of our stakeholder groups that are there. And we had a great conversation. You can hear some of these back on our website. They're recorded. So we had a great conversation with our good friend Julie Freshman, who is an equine liability attorney. If you haven't read Julie's book, go buy Julie's book. I'm a huge fan of hers, and just really trying to make people aware of some of these issues that equine liability laws are different from state to state or locality to locality. It's not as simple as just putting up a sign on the wall and thinking you got yourself covered. And that was what Julie's whole subject matter was about, was how to be sure you understand what you got to do there. So lots of good content there, Brian. And we do take suggestions from people. So if there's a subject that somebody wants us to explore, we did CBDs a couple of years ago. That was a hot topic. Okay, should we be using CBDs on horses or not?
I think it's still a hot topic.
And it's still a hot topic.
and a lot of, I'm not sure if there's much scientific or research data behind that or not, but everybody wants to kind of know those. I think it is a very hot topic.
Yeah, it was really an interesting discussion with the group that was attending for that, because there are clear opponents and proponents. There were people who were like, hey, I'm taking it myself. I see the benefits that I'd had. Why wouldn't I want to give it to my horse? And the people on the other side of the room were saying, you've got no scientific data to prove those benefits that you're talking about.
Right. I think that's an interesting modern topic, and it goes into the bigger one of welfare. And Jody and I spend a lot of time talking because we've got a big focus in the competitive side of our industry, and so modern medicine and where does that play in our sports and competition and all of that, and that goes into betting as well. So I think that's all very interesting stuff. So thank you for sharing. Jody, you got anything?
No, actually, I was thinking about that too. So, and I'm actually trying to figure out a way to get to the forum, right? I mean, that's kind of what I was started thinking about that. Do you, Julie, would you like to see numbers at that grow? I mean, would you?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Oh, yes.
I mean,
and during the pandemic, we did a lot of virtual stuff, and we're going to continue to do some of this virtually so more people get the opportunity to participate. One of the things I love to do, guys, and this is just me as a leader, is I don't like to reinvent the wheel. I like to look around at other industries to see if there's something that they've learned that we can model. So, for example, we might go to the PGA and say, hey, you've got this great youth program called First Tee. It's about getting kids into playing golf. How do we emulate that in the horse industry? What do we do? Or we might go over to the American Kennel Club and say, there's a lot of similarities in the dog world and showing dogs and competing with dogs and all the things you guys do. What can we learn from you, over here? And our industry is so diverse. A couple of years ago, we had the guy from the U.S. Tourism Association, and we were talking to him about tourism. Well, Jody, in Oklahoma City, the American Morgan Horse Grand National is one of the biggest horse shows they put on at the Oklahoma Fairgrounds. And they've quoted some huge statistic of how many dollars of tourism they bring into Oklahoma City. So we're saying to the Tourism Association, okay, how do we leverage what we're doing to get ourselves in a better position on some of these venues that we use for these competitions and things, because we're bringing them money, we're bringing them tax dollars into these communities. How do we use that data? So if you come to the forum, Jody, you'll hear me talk a lot about some of these other groups that we've sort of gone out and cherry picked and said, what can we learn from you? How can we take something that you've experienced and apply it to what we do?
No, that's great thinking. And Brian and I, we talk about that. We talk about that same topic because you're certainly blind if you stay in your own barn. You need to get outside and look in some other areas, and that's great thinking. And and hopefully I can get there. It's a little bit short notice, but I'd love to come and listen to you talk in person. That would be great.
Hey, Jody, my next topic, if I can find a speaker, is pickleball. Pickleball has taken off like crazy. How can we become the pickleball?
We've been there.
You just hit two keys. I use the analogy of First Tee with golf, and you're now hitting one, because I've been using that one. Jody and I talk about it a lot. Pickleball didn't even exist, I don't know, 10 years ago. And now it's got a professional league and away you go. And so, yes, I agree with you wholeheartedly on getting out of our barn, looking a little bit bigger? How do we, look at other industries? How have they done it? Are there different ways we can do it? I use the first ride, because how do we get those 38 million households that have horse interest, and how do we get them to their first ride or first touch or whatever that is? And yes, I'd love to explore that.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. I talked to Brian about that a few weeks ago, and just in casual conversation with Chelsea, and I said, look, the horse world needs pickleball because it would unite everyone, right? I mean, it would give everyone that they could do the same thing instead of being so diverse like we are, right? I mean, you can look, it doesn't matter if you rope or if you show rail horses or flat saddle horses. We need something that everyone can do and have fun and be competitive at it. So we haven't found that yet, but, perhaps it'll come.
It might come out of the Denver Forum, right?
You never know.
No, never
right?
know.
Well, Julie, we can't thank you enough. We're on our time, and I know that we could all just keep going. All of us have the enthusiasm and passion and love for our industry that we do, but we can't thank you enough for not only you and your time, but the American Horse Council. And so your commitment to the Horse Council and the resources and organization of the Horse Council and what you guys are doing for all of us. So I can't say thank you enough, and I really appreciate, on behalf of Jody and I in the Cowboy office, we just say thank you.
Well, I thank you guys. I tell people all the time what I do for a living. I get on the elevator and somebody says, well, hi, what do you do? And I say, oh, I work for the horse industry. And they were like, oh. And so I'm that constant communicator and talking about why this is so important and how essential it is to the ability to our industry to thrive and survive and be sustainable, is that we keep educating people and we keep, passing on that message along and keep drawing people into it. When I do that economic impact study, those numbers are so powerful. So it's really vital that we get some of these messages across. And I appreciate you guys giving me some airtime to talk about that with your listeners.
Without a doubt, and we'd love to follow through with you over the course of the year on several of those things. Let me ask you a last question. Your 2023 impact study, will that be end of calendar year when we would see that, or what's your expectation?
Yep. So right now we're in the process of finalizing the survey questions. We're in the deep end of that right now. Survey will probably go out about April. It'll run for about 6 months. So we're shooting for probably around the fourth quarter to have the final report. We're really excited about that. I've got a lot of stakeholders that are helping us with survey questions this time and contributing ideas for that. And we are offering prizes this time for people. So make sure your listeners know, if you complete the survey, you're going to be eligible for some great prizes. So that's our incentives, is to get people to fill out the survey this time. But we're really excited about having those numbers as we go into the fall next year. What we did in 2017 was we had a big unveil, and we had a huge webinar and invited anybody that wanted to hear the numbers to come here and ask questions and talk about all the things that were associated with the survey. And this time, like I said, I've got so many more numbers that we're going to try to get this time. We didn't even have time to touch on the whole idea that we've got a veterinary shortage and what does that look like. So we're going to really be interested in universities. How many students are in the pipeline? What do we think the next wave of our leadership in the industry looks like? We're going to be looking more at horses that are on Native American lands or on federal lands. We don't typically count them in the survey, but we're really curious because we're looking at what's that overall population and how's that come into play. So lots of new things that we're asking this time. I really would like to get at how many, the labor force, how many workers do horse trainers, Jody, how many workers do you need? How many do you have? What's the gap there? Because we're fighting for visas in order to get foreign workers in to help us on the backstretch or in our barns as grooms or hot walkers or whatever. And we've got to make our argument with this number. And right now, what we can tell them is, we need them. We really, really need them, but we don't have a number. And so I'm trying to say, here's how many we need, and here's how many we have, and here's how big the gap is, so we can make that case. So lots of new things to come out of this survey, I think, this time around.
Yep. Well, that's exciting. Jody is a very strong proponent, and he talks about education. We can't educate ourselves enough, a lot. And so I'm not trying to steal his thunder, but Jody and I in the Cowboy office, however we can help the Horse Council and continually educating the populace and all of us in the horse world, we're all about it. So we'll stay in touch. And so we look forward to more.
Yeah, I look forward to talking with you guys some more. And if you want a progress report sometime, down the road as we get the survey going, I'm happy to come back and tell you, how many responses we've had to date and sort of what we're starting to see look like some preliminary data and what we need to shore up around that.
We'd
awesome.
love to.
We'll have you back. Anyway, Julie, thank you so much. I mean, you've been great.
Happy to do it.
I'm going to close this out. Again, thank you so much, Julie, and thank you to the American Horse Council and all of your staff. I know how hard all of you work for all of us, and so thank you very much. We will put direct links through the Cowboy Office website, but to the audience, horsecouncil.org is where you can get straight to the American Horse Council. Remember that. It's simple. It's easy. You can get right to it. As our show publicizes to the audience, we want you to remember to simply hit the subscribe and or like button on whatever platform you visit us on. And until next time, enjoy the ride.
Yep. Thank you. And Julie, again, thank you. Brian, thank you. We'll look forward to the next show. Stay in the middle.
Today's episode is brought to you by 4D Productions in cooperation with the Consultment Agency, a full-service agency that helps bring forward-thinking equine brands into the 21st century using digital skills and services such as website development, graphic design, social media, and media production such as the podcast you're consuming here today. Thank you so much for riding along with us today. Sign up at cowboyoffice.com to be the first to know about topics affecting the industry we love so much. You can reach out to us with topics you care about by finding us on TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, and all podcast platforms. And remember, share this episode with someone that may enjoy it, because the more we can share our horses with others, the better our world will be.